afternoon. Do we want to do housekeeping before or after Chase? After? Chase? Before? I got an email about the lab quiz. There wasn't one. There isn't one this week. I'll have a handout for you. We're actually going to take a hike and go down to the water treatment plant. We're going to learn about where our drinking water comes from. So this is a fun lab. You guys get a break from what we normally do. So no lab quiz, no coursework assignment, and I'll have the handout. Cool? All right. That's number one. Yep.
Do we still need to dress like lab attire? Can we wear like shorts or whatever?
You can wear shorts. I would wear comfortable walking shoes. Okay? Comfortable walking shoes. We will be outside. The weather sounds fabulous. Supposed to be high 70s tomorrow. So time to right for this week. I'm excited about that. Other housekeeping, there is a quiz Friday, just a reminder. Okay, there's a quiz Friday over chapters 1 and 2. And there'll be a test about a week later. Okay, there'll be a test about a week later. I have, in terms of homework, I've opened up a couple of people's for a few more days on what was due last Friday. If you need that, let me know. Okay, so if you need that, let me know. If I didn't send a reply email, I forgot to because I did that to somebody and I can't figure out who it was, then check and see if it's open. Okay, if you've sent me one. If I haven't done it, then send me a second email. I don't think I've got any other housekeeping. Okay, I don't think I have any. And so I'd like to introduce Austin Chase Sigler. Chase. Chase got in this seat, I guess, 8 years ago.
It was the one across the hall, but
yeah, next door. So in P10, actually I prefer that room because it comes right off the elevator, and when you do demos and stuff, then you don't have to go through 2 doors. And we also have a magnifier in there so I can blow things up. We don't have that in this room, but for some reason the registrar won't do that for me. Did I say that out loud? And that's on video. I'll have to edit that. Kidding, just kidding. But anyway, Chase went on from here to get or to start teaching actually, and taught at the high school level for a year or 2. Worked on a master's in education, and then decided that teaching wasn't where you needed to be.
well, I really wanted to teach, but I felt that teaching in college would be better.
So he's working on a PhD at University, actually at Missouri Science and Technology, MS&T, in Rolla, Missouri, and he's actually doing a dissertation topic on brain chemistry. So looking at traumatic injuries and the metabolites that occur from that, and so maybe there would be a test or something that you could look at to predict the severity of the brain injury. And he's going to give that work towards that today at 4 o'clock. So there is a talk at 4 p.m. today in Plaster Auditorium. I'll have cookies, okay? If anybody would like to come by and get a cookie and listen to one of the successful scientists that's graduated from here present what he's been doing over the last few years. Cool? Yeah? So you guys are invited. I know it's Monday evening and we have a convocation at 4 also that's competing, so freshmen, I understand she couldn't be here.
I understand too.
He did combos too. So I brought him down to your class today so that he could talk about his experience, and then you could ask him questions about his experience and ask him about things like, do you really get paid to be a graduate student? And stuff like that, and how much you get paid, and whether you get insurance or not at MS&T, and so on. Just to spark some interest. Cool? All right. I'll turn it over to Chase.
Well, thank you so much for having me here. Like Dr. Garrison said, I was here about 8 years ago, 2013, and I was terrified. My high school education wasn't the best. I went to a very small school, and while there was a lot of individual interaction between the teacher and the students, there wasn't a lot of opportunity for advancement. So general chemistry here at College of the Ozarks was actually my first chemistry course. And I was kind of worried about it because I hadn't had a chemistry in high school, and so if anyone else is like just kind of scared of being in this class and this is really hard stuff, I've been in the exact same place. I remember one of the first lectures that came through, and Dr. Garrison had brought in a senior undergraduate to talk about their research. You know, in the chemistry program, if any of you are chemistry majors, you will eventually get a research project with one of the faculty here, and you'll work with them for about 1.5 years on a project. And he comes in and he talks about his work, and he is about 9,000 miles above my head with everything that he said. And I thought, man, I'm never gonna be able to understand any of that, or where he's coming from, anything like that. And I asked at the beginning if Dr. Garrison still did his bit with brought a guitar in, and he talks about building your foundation in chemistry, and he sings you a nice song about moles that I still remember. And so I built my foundation here at College of the Ozarks. And I'm going to tell you what you can do with that foundation, and it's actually quite a lot. So when I graduated from C of O, I applied to a PhD program and then decided, you know, maybe it's not quite time yet. And I ended up actually withdrawing my application. There were some crazy life events that happened. Life gets in the way sometimes. And so I was looking for a job, and luckily, like after being at College of the Ozarks for 4 years, I had 3 years experience teaching, doing the TA work here in the chemistry department. You have TAs in your lab. I was one of those. And that put me into a really good position. If y'all don't know it, I know you probably get told a lot, but you're in a really great place at College of the Ozarks to springboard your career. It's gonna happen. And so I got hired on an emergency basis to Viola High School to teach their biology program. I actually have 2 degrees, chemistry and biology, from here. But I taught their intro-level biology, human anatomy, some of those kind of things. I did that for 1 year, and then I decided, okay, this is pretty cool, but if I stay here, I'm gonna be here the rest of my career. And I wasn't sure if I wanted that. I was still kind of deciding. But when you get a degree from here, you kind of get to have some flexibility in what you do. You don't have to work the same job. You can decide to switch. I switched into a quality control chemist role up at Baxter Laboratories in Mountain Home, Arkansas. And I did that for a little while. That didn't work out. I really didn't like it. It was a lot of nonsense. But so I looked back again, and it was about November at this time, so right before the spring semester of 2019, and I decided, okay, maybe now's the time that I could go back and get the PhD. And so I applied, Missouri S&T, and got accepted, and I started working with a really great professor, Dr. CHE114, and I worked on brain chemistry, on assessing biomarkers for traumatic brain injury. And so if you can't come to the talk, I'll give you kind of a sneak peek. Basically, right now, if you were to hit your head, and it's not very serious, but it's worth going to the doctor, you go to the doctor, and what they're probably going to do is do some neuropsychological evaluations. They're going to send you home and say, you know, you probably got a concussion. They're not really gonna do anything diagnostically for you. They can't. They're gonna look at your eyes, they're gonna do a GCS on you. Your GCS will probably be fine because it's a mild injury at that point. If you have a major injury, you will go into a $100,000+ imaging tool, magnetic resonance imaging, and you will get a picture of your brain. And they will determine how severe your injury is based on that picture. The problem with all of those things is, one, for the mildly injured person, we're not going to put you in an MRI. It's too expensive, and insurance won't cover it. And those tests are just very arduous for a physician to do. For the major injury, when you do the MRI, it's actually subjective, believe it or not. When the physician looks at the image produced from an MRI, they may determine, like different physicians looking at the same image could determine different levels of severity of the injury, and thus the treatment that you would get could be different. So what my group is doing is using analytical instrumentation, like some of the stuff that you guys are using or will use later in your programs, to assess biomarkers, potential metabolites that could go up or down depending on the severity of injury. And we do this through a urine test, which is really cheap. We can collect urine for a lot cheaper than we can put you in an MRI. And also, imagine an MRI in a scenario where you're in a combat field. There's soldiers. You're probably not going to bring an MRI out to them, and they need it a lot. We need to know quickly and with a great deal of accuracy how severe their injury is. And so my diagnostic method using molecular biomarkers could be that solution. And it's not saying that would completely replace the MRI, but it could be an extra tool in a physician's belt so that when a person comes in with an injury, we can know more about how long they'll be out, how long they should maybe not be in a combat situation, how long they should not be playing sports, how long they should be out from their job. All of those questions are very important to the US government, military, to workforces and employers. And those are the questions that we're trying to solve in the Honglen Shi group. And I've been very lucky to be part of that research for almost 3 years now. I'm writing my dissertation on this topic, and I will finish my PhD hopefully next December. And yes, I do get paid for being a graduate student. And it's debt-free also, because they're paying for my education, and they're paying for my stipend to live and support my family. I have a daughter and a wife, and it's a really great deal. And this is just one of the doors that opens for you when you graduate here with a degree. And so with that, I'll take any questions of what you want to know. I can talk about a lot of issues. I can talk about being a quality control chemist. I can talk about being in the high school system as a high school teacher. Don't know if I have any future high school teachers here, or I can talk about graduate school. What would you like to know? Sure.
Graduate school wise, you said you get paid. Have you gotten paid for it from the get-go of being accepted into grad school?
Yes. So every graduate student in chemistry at Missouri S&T, it's not true for all programs, but chemistry is a majorly needed field. And so every student, when you first come in, you'll likely be a TA. So you will be helping out with students in general chemistry probably. And you'll grade papers, you'll help with the lab, you'll do a lot of what you would do if you decide to work for Dr. Garrison in the chemistry department here. Later on, as you get better at research, and if your professor has funding, they might fund you for a graduate research assistantship in which you get paid to do the research. And so I've been both. I've been on a TA and an RA, and both of them are paid. They're paid at basically the same level. An RA gets about 10% more, but it's not really a noticeable difference. But yes, and the education is paid throughout.
I was gonna ask, how did you start your search for jobs after you graduated, like in Northern Arkansas, a high school job? How did you find those?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. So I relied a lot on the internet looking for jobs, and I wasn't really looking for an education job. I was just looking for any job that would hire me at that point. I took a job that I had actually worked the summer before, and they hired me on again, so I had a little bit of breathing room for the summer, and I was living with my parents at that point to get on my feet after graduation, so there's no real shame in that. But as I was looking for jobs, and you tell people that you're looking for jobs, what happened to me is I told my church family that I was looking for jobs, and they prayed for me. And a person from the church family at Viola, Arkansas said, "Hey, they're looking for a high school science teacher." And so that's how I found that job.
So
Networking, that's big, you know. Yeah, you need to make sure everyone knows that you're looking for a job. You can't keep it to yourself. Yes, sir.
Why did you come to CHE knowing you wanted
good students. Yeah, so actually the biochemistry major didn't exist back then. I wish it had, because I would have done that instead of like a chemistry, biology double major. It was kind of tough. But I went in thinking I wanted to be a medical doctor, and I kind of walked through that. So freshman year, sophomore year, I'll never forget, during my junior year, I was TAing, and I also had a little side hustle that was teaching at an elementary school, just doing little science experiments for this Hollister Elementary, the Tiger Time, that program. And I was talking about that. I remember I was talking with one of the other TAs about it, and I was very excited about it. And Dr. Garrison walks into the room. I don't know if you remember this.
I remember you doing Tiger Time though.
Yeah, so I
I
did.
forgot it this moment, but yeah, it's all flashing back, so it may get to my brain here in a minute.
So he comes in and I'm talking about this, and you know, he sees the passion. He's pretty good at seeing potential in people, and he says, "I think we might have a teacher in the room." And I looked at him and laughed, and I said, "No, no, I want to be a doctor." My junior, so the second semester of my junior year, I took a biology senior thesis, which for pre-med students was shadowing doctors. And I had a big contrast in my life of, I really loved what I was doing in the TA, I really loved what I was doing at Tiger Time, and I really hated what I was doing when I was shadowing doctors. And that pretty much is what woke me up to the fact that maybe I don't need to be applying to medical school, maybe I need to switch to the PhD. And actually, Dr. Eason, he's since left, but he went on the American Chemical Society conference and let me teach organic chemistry, let me lecture for the class for a week. And that was just the coolest experience of my life. And so that's what made me want to switch. And if you get a degree, like a chemistry degree, it's really easy to switch those kind of things. I didn't have to take a whole bunch of other classes, I just had to keep doing what I was doing. So my advice for you is to always have a plan for what you want to do after here, but also always be flexible for when God wants to change what you want to do. And a lot of times it's really easy to change, actually.
So for your graduate research, what made you decide to do the research you're doing, or did you just kind of jump in with what you
You want to go to graduate school, don't you?
I
Thinking about it. Okay. Yeah. So the great thing about being a first semester graduate student at any R1 or even R2 institution is everybody is your best friend. Because I got a secret for you. Everybody that does research in the graduate faculty level, they want someone else to do research with them. Everybody, they want graduate students. And so I had the opportunity to hear people talk about how their research went and what it was like to do those kind of things. What convinced me to join Dr. Shee's group is she was doing things I was interested in, so there has to be an interest. I actually went, I really betrayed Dr. Garrison. During my undergraduate, I was all about organic chemistry. It was all about organic chemistry.
You guys know that no matter what you decide to do with your lives, that I have 100% support, just like him, right? It doesn't, he became a chemist, and he's actually an analytical chemist now, because he saw the light. But you guys should find what excites you, kind of like what Chase was talking about, right? And I really will encourage that. You also should find something you like that will pay you well enough to meet your needs in life.
Yes.
Okay, that's coming from the parent side of you. Okay, because there are some things that you want to do that would be amazing. But I'm interrupting. Go ahead.
No, good. So I liked her research, so that was a plus. But there were several people in the research faculty that I liked. She articulated it well, so she could explain to me what she was doing in a way that I could understand. And she also had funding. I knew that I wasn't going to be a great judge of if people's ideas were good or worthy of funding, but if someone has a lot of grants from different research organizations, NIH, NSF, those kind of grants, DoD, then that gives you a hint as to how good their ideas are. And I've been really fortunate with Dr. Shee's group to have good ideas and be able to pursue them. I worked on a traumatic brain injury project from the beginning. It's funded through a DoD grant, and it's still funded. It was a $1.5 million grant that she got, so.
Can I make an additional comment on that? That when you're looking for an advisor, make sure that they are sustainable. If they aren't getting grants, then they'll be asked to leave the college, because that's a big part of how the universities of that size maintain their research facilities, is through the DOCLE grant. And so if someone doesn't have funding, and their grants aren't being funded when they're making those requests, then they'll probably be moving somewhere else. Does that make sense? So there's advantages to those people who are established and have good grants.
And also, she was a really nice person. You gotta work with someone that you can get along with. Like, you can't, when you pick an advisor, you're picking them for 4 or 5 years sometimes. And so, you really gotta pick someone you can work with.
It's a lifetime. I'm still in contact regularly with my research advisor from graduate school. He's long retired, but he writes silly excerpts from his books that he's writing on the internet, and I read those and make comments and stuff like that. Yeah. So I send him an email every once in a while, just let him know what's going on.
So if you continue with this research, will you move on to like other projects or just continue to work on this one specifically?
Yeah, so I am on other projects. When I started my PhD, I was only on the traumatic brain injury project. And that was to give me some focus. Basically, the deliverables for the project were to have the analytical method finished by 6 months. And I was still learning how to use the instrument at month like 3. And so we weren't gonna get those deliverables, but we could at least say like, we're working on it. But as I matured in my graduate education, I started to get more responsibilities. So we're doing another project with single cell ICP-MS, inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometry, where we are looking for tracking the individual metal content in a Legionella cell. And that helps us with drug delivery, finding out if the drug has been delivered. A lot of drugs are actually carried by a metal. And so we're working on that project. There's another blast-related TBI project that I'm on, but I'm not the main person in it, where they're setting off explosives near rats and looking at their brains. So that's cool. But it's a completely different project from the one that I'm working on with the soldiers at Fort Leonard Wood. And so, yeah, there's other projects that you do, and you kind of, part of the projects pick you, like your professor will say, oh, you're working on this project now, and then other times you kind of pick the projects and you say, I think this one would be a worthy thing to pursue. And as you really get on, I just defended my comprehensive exam, which was writing a grant proposal, a mock grant proposal that I defended in front of my committee of 5 professors that I handpicked to judge me furiously. And so they judged me on that proposal, and then now we're looking at trying to get some funding from the NIH for my own proposal. So that's how projects kind of originate, is through grants, and then from grants you get the graduate students and they do the research, and there it is.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Did your research project and writing a proposal here at College of the Ozarks, did that help you any when you were, did we model that well enough, or did you remember everything?
Yeah, it was really good. It wasn't in the same format as what I had to do. So like I sent in a draft to Dr. Shee, and she said, this is all wrong. Like you have to look at actually what DoD and what NIH says you need to do for those. But those issues are all really minor and easy to figure out when you have an education like I got, you can figure those things out. But as far as the content and how to write scientific content, yes, the research sequence at CFO was absolutely enough. So, it's a separate thing in that you don't just continue on after your bachelor's degree. When you get your bachelor's degree, there will be there's a termination of your relationship with College of the Ozarks, basically. You will have your degree, you have it finished, and as far as College of the Ozarks is concerned, there's nothing left to do. You finish your requirements. Then you apply to the graduate school where you want to go. College of the Ozarks doesn't have a graduate school, so you'll have to seek elsewhere. But you make that application, and when you get accepted, that's when you basically are funded. And if you don't have an advisor at that point, a lot of people come in knowing exactly who they want to work for, but some people don't, and that's fine. And so you just end up working for the department in TAing classes. And you said something about the pay.
So like you could have got a job right out of CFO, but would it have been just like a less intensive job or?
Yeah, so I worked 2 jobs after CFO before I had any graduate education. One was a high school teacher, and there's supposed to be a process where you get an education degree and then go and teach in high school. The great thing, maybe bad thing, but I think it's a great thing about chemistry and biology is those teachers are so highly needed that people will hire you and then they will get you qualified. And that's the best thing is when I took a job teaching high school, they really needed a high school teacher for biology. I had all of the content knowledge and I actually had the ability to speak publicly, and that's why everyone at CFO takes up a public speaking class. You really need it for several career paths that you go on. I would argue almost any. But I had all of the information that I needed to teach the class, so they let me start teaching the class under a provisional licensure for teaching in Arkansas. And then I took master's classes, which were education classes, so they were not taught by chemists, they were taught by people with education degrees. And so when I was doing those master's classes, that was getting me a more permanent qualification. And I could have chose to stay there and be a high school teacher with a master's degree at master's degree level pay. The second job I worked was a quality control job. So I was testing samples to make sure that they were pure. I was making sure that the manufacturing line, so the materials that came into manufacturing, all of them had to go through me, basically, through a little sample to make sure, because we were making medical grade products. And so we had to make sure that they were what the manufacturer of those products said they were. And so that was what I did there. My advice for you is to not think too much with regard to pay, because it's not as big a deal as you may think it is. It is a big deal if you can't afford to feed your family, but usually we're not getting those kind of jobs after a bachelor's degree. If you go to get an advanced degree because you want more money, it's likely to backfire and it's likely to blow up in your face. If you do it because you love the science and you want to pursue that, then that's the worthy endeavor. And even a bachelor's degree, like, if you go into it thinking just like, oh, this is an easy major, I'll just finish it, it's not really a worthy cause to pursue at that point, and you'll end up hating your job. So.
Can I add a little bit to that? I heard a little bit different. I understand where you went, but I heard a little bit different question in that.
Sure.
And the answer to that is, if you're going directly to graduate school from here, he's correct. When you get done here, you're done. But you should apply probably your junior year, second semesters, when you should start looking at those applications. You should have already taken the GRE.
Yes.
Okay? And so if you're gonna go directly from here, then you wanna be, your junior years when you start planning that application and those things, okay? So Chase did something different. He left here, went to work in the bigger world, and then decided that he wanted to teach at the collegiate level and applied later. Does that make sense? So he switched gears. He went into one field, actually then a second field, and then to graduate school. And then he gets his tuition paid. Do you get health insurance too at MST?
I do not.
Okay, some colleges actually pay health insurance too. But generally the stipends are somewhere around $22,000 a year. MS&T? I'm not sure.
No, I get, a litlittle over 24, actually.
24,000.
It's enough to live on. It was about what I was making as a teacher.
Plus tuition, and so the package is well over, 30,000 per year, in terms of what they're compensating you with. And then they pay for all research supplies and all those things. So the grants pay for that.
But yes, if you want to go to graduate school right after your undergrad, that is possible. It's very doable. You just have to prepare. So around your junior year, you'd take the GRE, you would start feeling out graduate schools, saying, where do I want to go? And then applying to those. Otherwise, you're going to get to the end of your senior year and you're going to be left high and dry because you don't have a placement at a graduate school. Thank you.
How many CBO graduates are at MSD chemistry right now? Is Andy still there? Andy
There's
Powell?
at least two, Zach Mays.
Zach Mays, and you,
Me.
is Andy Powell still there, did he finish? He was doing PCAM, redheaded,
Yeah, he finished.
he finished.
Mhm.
So we just have two there now, I wasn't sure whether Andy finished. We have a few at University of Missouri Columbia, we've sent students to Vanderbilt, yeah, we've sent them all, okay.
So everyone that goes to graduate school takes the GRE?
Yes.
Okay.
They actually waived it, you missed your opportunity for COVID last year for a lot of schools.
Yeah.
But I think it's back.
What exactly, okay, so education is like my backup, because I'm animal science pre-med right now, and I'm still gonna go to graduate school either way. But if I don't get into vet school and I wanna go straight into education, is there any other like requirements I'm gonna have to take on here to get a master's in education?
No, so I got a degree in chemistry and biology, and so that was my bachelor's degree. I didn't have any education credits. What you would do is you can go searching for jobs right away. If you don't have an education degree, you probably won't get one in May when they start hiring, or even earlier sometimes. But when they need them in August or July, that's when people like us would get hired, really. But even if you don't get hired, you can do a master's in education it's called a Master's of Arts in Teaching. It's not quite the same as a Master's in Education, but an MAT program, that's the one that I went through. And that leads to licensure, and it leads to a master's degree. And high schools don't care what your master's degree is from, like if it's actually an MEd or if it's an MAT, they don't really care, you still get like the master's degree paid. But at that point, like if you get through an MAT program, which you have to pay for to go through, if you're doing it independently, then if you don't get a job teaching after that, it's very unlikely you wouldn't get a teaching job. But you would have to go through the master's education.
We actually have a graduate teaching in Branson, Mr. Walworth, who graduated, actually got a master's in chemistry. Another student did the same thing, Ben Enns was his name. Jason Walworth, I couldn't think of his first name for a second. But anyway, they both went on and got masters and decided they didn't want to do research anymore. And so they went and got teaching jobs at small schools and then finished their master's in, or their education or the MTA. I'm not sure which, but both of them are fully employed and have been in those careers for years and love them. And in fact, my son has chemistry with Mr. Walworth this semester at Branson, which is kind of fun. One of our students is going to teach him.
But yes, from a bachelor's degree in a science, it's easy to get qualified for that kind of thing.
Good stuff, guys. It's not often we get this perspective, right? Someone that was in your chair not that long ago, who's had some experiences. I think also very well spoken. Would you guys agree with that? Very deliberate when he does. He can go on, I just was you have more questions? I mean, I'm not gonna shut it down.
out of learning this, right?
So I'm actually interested in research myself, but more on the animal side of things. Would you have any recommendations of like, I'm just like, I know I wanna do research, I just don't know where to start with what I wanna do exactly, so.
Yeah, so, what is your degree path now?
So conservation and, wildlife management.
Okay. Well, you know, obviously all around the country, but particularly in Missouri is a great place to get a graduate degree in conservation biology. There's other career paths that can stem from that. One of my former high school teachers is a wildlife officer with Missouri Department of Conservation, and that's a good job. She really likes that. And it, you know, you say you want to do research. I mean, I would argue that my former high school teacher does a lot of research. She goes out to people's farms and determines the best way to manage that land. You know, she manages forests, those kind of things. I would argue that that's kind of research, but it's not the cutting edge next step into what we do in the science. That's more of a graduate school type thing. So you can research those programs. My recommendation would be to talk to people that are teaching at those institutions. Like you can look up the institution and say, oh, that's a really good graduate program in conservation biology. And then you reach out to those people, and like I said, people who are graduate faculty, they're always looking for graduate students. They're always looking for them. So they'll probably talk to you about their work. Or you can look up their publications, and you can read their publications, and you'll get to know a little more about their work through that. And publications are numerous, and everybody's got them. So in the graduate faculty, so you'll be able to know more about what they do. It's a little hard to digest when you first read a research paper. It's a little overwhelming, but it gets easier. And so that would be my recommendation to you, is start reading in those fields, start reading in those journals of, you know, nail down what you want to do. And then if you see a person's name coming up, say, oh, maybe that's someone that I could work with. They're still working. Those recent publications are good for that.
Thank you.
When comparing like getting a master's to just having a bachelor of science and a degree, how much like upward job mobility does that get you having a master's rather than just a regular bachelor of science?
Yeah, so a lot of places with a master's degree, a lot of places that's a pay bump, and they basically count that as years of experience. So I know, like in my quality control job, I didn't have a master's when I went there, but had I had a master's, they would count that as 2 years experience in the field of quality control chemistry. And there would be a pay increase with that, because you know, when you get paid, generally in a job, you have a year, and that's your salary for the year, and then it bumps up a little bit every year following that, because you get better at doing it. And so that's usually how the master's works. There's some things that, like you need a master's, or they want someone with a master's degree to apply, but it's kind of few and far between. Usually if you're qualified with the bachelor's, you would be qualified with the master's, unless you're talking about something like being an adjunct professor in a university, then of course you need a master's. They're not gonna let people with bachelor's degrees teach in the college setting. But yeah, that answered it.
Yeah, I just didn't know if I wanted to.
So this is interesting, and Chase didn't really, you're talking about a master's, but I don't have a master's. I went directly into a PhD program and finished that in 4 years, and was allowed to do that because of the way chemistry works. There's a number of other fields that do the same thing in the sciences, where when you make application to graduate school, they take you as a PhD candidate, which you are at Rolla. I know that they do that there. And sometimes when you just finish with a master's, that means that for some reason you aren't going to be able to finish the PhD program. It doesn't make you less than, but that's a conversation that you wouldn't want to have with the dean of the program, if you were a student, because that does happen occasionally. When you hit that master's level, it does qualify you to be group leaders and stuff like that on research teams in industry. Most often those are PhD chemists because of the nature of the business. And so when I've got one of my favorite graduates, early graduates, Chase is all of them are my favorites, but anyway, she just got a bachelor's, and she ended up working for a small company for quite a while, but then moved to Kansas City and took a position, and she was very well received, and she's an amazing chemist, right? But she could never move to the team leader position because she only had a bachelor's. And she expressed her frustration in that the group was doing her chemistry, and she was the one that was doing all the planning, but the PhD chemist was the one that was getting paid for it. And so there's a frustration there sometimes that you may want to continue on, especially when you can do it debt-free, and his salary is for sure double what hers is, in that position. So she's a bench chemist by lane, because she only has a bachelor's degree.
And I will say also, I don't know if this is true across the board, but at least at S&T, S&T, this is true. PhD candidates are guaranteed funding. So like another question was, like, did you get your paycheck from the beginning? Yes, I did. I'm a PhD student. But master's students are not, so if you come in and say, I want a master's, you're not guaranteed the funding, and you're not guaranteed to even get a TA position or be paying for the education. I've heard this, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard that a lot of master's programs actually end up being the ones that pay a bulk of the administrative cost of running a program, you know, because they're having to pay for the education and take on debt, and the PhD students are the ones that are getting it overpaid. I married into debt. It's not fun. I didn't have any debt when I got married, but then when I got married, all of a sudden I had a bunch of debt, and it's not fun. We've paid off a lot of it, but stay out of debt if you can.
Good advice. Just let me advise. Anybody else?
What made you choose to join S&T?
So I chose it for a couple of reasons. The first and probably the most important is that it's pretty close to my home. It's about 2 hours from where my family, my mom and my dad live. And I would be lying if I said that wasn't a major factor in it. I have a younger brother and sister that I'm really trying to mentor and disciple in Christ, and being fairly close to them and very close to my family. And being close to them was important to me, but also S&T is a really good institution. There's a lot of interdisciplinary work that goes on there. Like in my work, I work with medical doctors. I work with explosives engineers doing the last PDI project. So there's a lot of crosstalk between researchers, and I mean, I had a support system there, you know, in Missouri. And my wife is also 2 hours away. Rollins in the middle of everywhere.
I don't know, I live 47 minutes away from it. So.
Oh, nice. so yeah.
I did want to say, there was a conversation going, and I was going to make a comment about getting into graduate school. And he keeps saying that the research advisors are looking for students, right? So, and I'll go all the way back to one of the first comments we made about networking, right? I think we came from up here. And so networking is the key. When you think that's what you want to do, go visit, right? You can make it formal if you would like, or informal, but at each of these programs, there's a graduate program coordinator. So if you're doing chemistry, there's one at University of Missouri, there's one at MS&T, and that coordinator is the one that puts all the files together for applications and all those other things. Find that person, send them an email, right? It'll be online. You can find them on the chemistry webpage, graduate coordinator, student coordinator, and send them that email and say, I am really interested in attending graduate school at whatever university that is, and was hoping that you might be able to, arrange a visit and go meet them.
Yeah.
And they will see how normal you are,
And S&T paid for me to visit them. I had a high enough GPA that they paid a travel stipend. They didn't pay me like a ton of money, but it was enough to cover my travel expenses. They paid my hotel and they, paid my mileage to get there. A lot of places will do that. They want that.
are you guys hearing that they want students in that area? It's different than medical school. Medical school, film school, veterinary school, they're highly, highly competitive, and it's a true competition. For graduate school, right, those people are competing for students with the other faculty on that. Yeah. Throwing that up, okay? We're out of time. Everybody, can we thank Chase?